And in this video, we take a look at the potential motive for murder concerning the guilty verdict around Michael Steele and Jack Holmes.
Hello. Hello, please. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We've come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now really the only place to start in terms of the motive for murder and the guilt of Michael Steele and Jack Holmes is the statement which was given by Donna Jaggers. Donna Jaggers being the long-term girlfriend of Craig Rolfe, the driver of the Range Rover on the evening of December the 6th. The following is a section of the police statement given by Donna Jaggers on the 14th of March 1996. The last deal which Steele carried out for them was approximately 2 weeks after Pat Tate was released from prison, which was at the end of the 10th, 95. Craig told me that Mickey Steele was arranging to bring in £60,000 worth of cannabis from abroad. Craig put in £7,000, Tucker put in £20,000, and Tate and a fourth person called Barry Dorman were putting in the remainder of the money. A couple of days before the cannabis was collected, I went with Craig to Tucker's home address in Fobbing, Essex to hand him the £7,000, which was in a Tesco's carrier bag. The money was handed to Tucker, who was going to hand it to Steele. We were only at the house for about 5 minutes, and as Craig and I were leaving and walking down the driveway towards our car, I saw Mickey Steele walking up the driveway towards the house. He passed by us and nodded to Craig. He did not speak or acknowledge myself. Steele had come from a white car which I believe he had been driving. I cannot say what the car was, but it was clean and had the appearance of an average family saloon. There was a second male in the car who had short dark hair and appeared to be a little bit younger than Steele. He appeared clean-shaven, but I did not take any further notice. We got into our vehicle, which I believe was a Vauxhall Frontera, which had been loaned to Tate by Barry Dorman, and left. A couple of days later, Craig told me that Steele had been arrested by customs officers whilst he was taking his boat from the water. This was following him dropping the cannabis off at a safe point on the coastline about 3 miles away. That same day, Tate was arrested during the early afternoon, having crashed Tucker's Porsche car in Southend. I was at work and would have finished at 1500 hours that day. Craig picked me up from work and told me what had happened to Steele. About 1600 hours, Tucker phoned Craig on his mobile phone and told him about his car and what Tate had done to it. At about 1800 hours that day, Craig and I drove to Southend Police Station to collect Tate. Once in the vehicle, I became aware that Tate already knew about Steele being arrested. He then used Craig's mobile phone to ring Jackie Street. He asked her if everything was safe. I took it that it was as a result of Tate's manner and subsequently what he said to Craig. He said that it was all safe. I took this to mean that the drugs had not been found. On this occasion I did not know where the meeting between Steele and the others was to take place, but after a couple of days Craig brought his share of the cannabis round to our house in Chafford 100. Because the cannabis had already been sold on, the same day Craig and I took it up to the Golders Green area of North London, where Craig handed it onto a black male called Gary. No money was exchanged because the cannabis was what was known as laid on for Gary to sell and then pay Craig. The agreed amount per kilo worked out to be approximately £10,000 for the lot. Already the others had placed their own share with other dealers, but very quickly they started receiving phone calls telling them that the cannabis was very poor quality. I learnt through Craig that Tate and Tucker were very agitated because Steele during this time was trying to push the price that he wanted up. In effect, this was eating into their personal profit from the deal. They contacted Steele and told him they wanted their money back because the cannabis was rubbish. Steele didn't want to take it back. Tate and Tucker then started putting real pressure on Steele to recover the money. By pressure, I mean through intimidation. I cannot say exactly what they did because I do not know, but I recall hearing conversations they had with Steele on the phone where they were ranting and raving at one another and pacing up and down. I understand that Steele finally agreed to return the cannabis and get their money back for them. Tate, in a fit of temper about the whole affair, smashed each slab before it was returned. Steele had told them a parcel the same size had been picked up by mistake, and that's how the problem had come about. I'm not certain, but I think that on this occasion Steele had to collect the cannabis from Tucker's home address in order to return it. Steele arranged to hand the money back to them on the continent. He was going to return the goods to his suppliers and then take the money to a pre-arranged location where he was to meet Craig, Tucker and Tate. The day they were going to meet coincided with Tony Tucker's birthday, which was on the 17th of the 11th. His girlfriend Anna had pre-booked a surprise night in a London hotel prior to the trip to collect the money being made. Therefore, Tony was not going to go. They wanted a group of people to go over in order that the money could be divided up to bring back into this country. Craig asked me to go, but I refused because I was not happy about getting involved and didn't want to go. The eventual party consisted of Barry Dorman and his wife, who went in their own car, Pat Tate and Craig with 3 girls, Donna Garwood, Liz Fletcher and Gaynor Hazer. They travelled in the Range Rover and left via Harwich. Craig did tell me where they went to, but I cannot remember the location or where they stayed. I know that they stayed overnight in a hotel and were met by Mickey Steele. I was told that he met Tate and they went into a separate room. They returned the next day with the money. Whilst all this was going on, I was told that Steele was promising Tate that they had a big job lined up for him. Craig told me that Steele had approached Tate and asked him to nick someone else's gear from them. I understood that Steele had been asked by a London-based drugs firm to import 30 kilos of Charlie, and I believed that he was going to bring it in by plane from Holland. He had told Pat Tate he was going to be given £50,000 as an upfront payment to take to Holland, and he was going to bring the Charlie back in company with a member of the London firm. The idea was that Pat Tate and Tony Tucker would rob the firm of the Charlie when it arrived over here. Steele had stated that he wanted to share it between them and had told the firm that he was going to land near Clacton. Craig told me that Steele was planning to actually land in South Essex, but I never knew exactly where this was likely to be. Craig, Tony and Pat had previously obtained a machine gun from a man called Mad Mick Bowman, and the details of this are subject of a previous statement. Tate and Tucker were going to use the gun on the man from the firm in order to take the Charlie. I knew that they had made sure the gun worked, but I did not know how far they were planning to go when they robbed the firm. Steele was going to land the plane, and Tate and Tucker were then going to take the complete load. It was going to be split, eventually 10 kilos each, and was going to be taken to John McCarthy. Craig told me that McCarthy was going to pay them nearly £1 million for the load, which was for Tate or Tucker to divide. Not long after Craig had told me about this, he told me that Tate and Tucker had decided that he was going to drive the load away once it had been taken and go to McCarthy's with it. They had told Craig that they intended to rip Steele off by cutting 3 kilos of the cocaine into 10 kilos of impure. This would have resulted in Tate and Tucker having 27 kilos between them. The remaining 3 kilos was going to be taken to Mick Bowman and he was going to cut it for them. I do not know what the arrangements were to get the 3 kilos to Bowman or to get the 10 kilos of impure back to Steele. By this time I was getting very worried by Craig's involvement and told him that I didn't want him to have any part in it. He told me that Steele didn't know that he was going to be driving, and he convinced me that he wasn't as heavily involved as the other two in what was going to happen. Now this, the prosecution alleged in court, was the main motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. From these individuals' perspectives, I guess they thought that this was plain sailing. Steele had found a way in with the drugs. They were going to continue to do this until they were all millionaires. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Darren Nichols really went wrong. He went over to Holland, acted like a bit of a prat, and the Dutch dealers most likely tried to rip them off. This, in turn, set off a chain of events which may have led to the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. But was this really the catalyst behind these murders? What we can say with a fair deal of certainty is that once this cannabis arrived over in the UK, trouble started almost immediately. The cannabis was being returned. It was rubbish. It was no good. Well, are you trying to rip me off by selling this? You know, people were upset. Dealers were upset. They were calling up Tucker, Tate and Rolfe saying that the stuff was no good. They wanted their money back. Were Tucker, Tate and Rolfe trying to pull the wool over their eyes? It caused a great deal of upset in those circles, I would imagine. And particularly for one individual in Pat Tate, the fact that he hadn't actually used his money. He'd come out of prison. This deal was going down. Steele put this deal to him. We can bring this money in. This is easy work. It's no problem. Just get the money. We'll go over. You'll be able to make a great profit from this. Tate has obviously put this to his backers. He's infused. He's energetic. He wants this deal to go through. This is the start of his career outside of prison. And now he's left with a load of dud gear and money which he has promised to these investors which he can't actually pay. Now, if we were talking about three level-headed individuals here, it may not have led to the catastrophic events which followed. But we're talking about Tucker Tate and Rolfe here, and particularly Patrick Tate, a very heavy drug user. Steroids, cocaine, heroin, the lot basically. But not only that, but how it affected his personality. Tate became incredibly volatile towards the end of 1995. So what would have happened around this time period? Tate is getting pressured because he's borrowed a great deal of money. Not only can he not pay the money back, but he can't give the investors the profit that he had once promised them. Now, this money was in fact paid back. This money was in fact paid back on the continent. Tate got the money back, but what exactly did he do with that money? Did those backers ever get their money back? Or did Tate think to himself, actually, I'm going to keep this money and I'm going to say that I haven't been repaid? Maybe that's because he had spent some of the money on drugs or something else, whatever, and he didn't have the full amount. So he thought he'd bide himself some time, he'd give himself a few days, a few weeks, he'll come up with some sort of story to say that Michael Steele hadn't repaid the full amount or repaid him at all. Did that then get back to Steele? If Steele and Wombs do have some hand in the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and that is a big if, I'm still not convinced that they acted alone. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that an outside firm approached Steele knowing that he was the way into their social circle in order to lure Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to a particular destination? I just don't believe that there's enough motive, even with the falling out regarding the dud cannabis deal, to create enough motive for these triple murders in terms of Michael Steele. We also have the situation concerning Leah Betts. And also in the book Blogs 19, it's mentioned there by Darren Nichols that Mick had found out that Pat Tate was a police informer. He was a snitch, and that was one of the reasons why he had to be taken care of. The way I've always looked at it in my own mind is the fact that if these individuals are in fact responsible or played some part in the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, then it was almost a perfect storm of events which led up to the deaths of these individuals. We had the dud cannabis deal, the biggest shipment of Steele's career. We had the unpredictable behaviour of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, who had lost face with their investors and were out quite a considerable amount of money. We also had the death of Leah Betts and the media storm which ensued after that event. And also we had Michael Steele mentioning, as I just said there, that Pat Tate was a potential police informant. Not to forget the threat against Michael Steele's life by Pat Tate, which was told to him by Pat Tate's then on and off girlfriend, Sarah Saunders, is the culmination of those very events. The cannabis deal, the situation with Leah Betts' death, the potential of Tate being a potential police informant, the threat to Michael Steele's life. Was it the perfect storm which created the necessity, most importantly, the necessity for Michael Steele to take action? Or are we looking at a mystery third party being involved here? It wasn't so much that Steele and Wombs pulled the trigger on the evening of December the 6th, but they lured Tucker, Tate and Rolfe down the lane knowing exactly who or what was waiting for them. One thing worth remembering, which I have mentioned in previous episodes, is that we talk a lot, we surmise, we discuss, we theorise, mainly based on the story told by Darren Nichols. I've even seen videos myself from some other creators who talk about Jack Wombs and Michael Steele must have been here, they must have been in the area of Rettendon, and that just simply isn't the case. If you actually really understand the telephone evidence, The actual version of events could be completely and wholeheartedly different to what we've been led to believe. The simple truth of the matter regarding the Essex Boys case is that we don't know if Michael Steele was ever in the Range Rover. We don't know if that Range Rover ever went to the Halfway House pub. We don't know if Michael Steele and Jack Womes then headed to the Hungry Horse pub to get changed after the murders. We can't say with any certainty at all that Jack Womes was scoping out the crime scene the day before these murders were committed. We need to remember, it's imperative to remember to anyone who is interested in this case, that the telephone evidence back in 1995 was approximate. So when they look at where people were, it's not like today where everything's, pinpointed to within a couple of feet of their actual location. Back in 1995, it was a lot more vague. The phone evidence, the phone logs, the phone calls, whichever you want to call them, are and always will be circumstantial, unless someone voluntarily puts themselves near the scene of the crime, i.e. Jack Womes with the Wheatsheaf pub car park story. So it's up to you which you believe. Do you believe Darren Nichols' version of events in its entirety? Do you believe some of his testimony, that there's some part truths to what he says? Whichever you believe, the fact of the matter is there is no actual proof regarding the telephone calls. It wasn't as easy and never has been as easy as saying Michael Steele, Jack Womes, Tony Tucker, Craig Rolfe and Pat Tate were at the Halfway House pub at X time. That is all based on the word of Darren Nichols. It was never backed up and never has been backed up in court with the telephone evidence. As I've said many times before, it's approximate. What I mean by that is when you made a call back in 1995, it would ping off the nearest beacon, and that beacon would service an area of 10 to 15 square miles. So to say categorically that they were definitely at the Halfway House, they definitely travelled to this location, Jack Womes was definitely looking down the lane on the 5th of December scoping out the crime scene, is simply wrong. That just is not right. That's based on the technicalities, the technical data, which does not show exact locations. As I say, it's a 10 to 15 square mile radius that he could have been in. Yes, of course, Jack Womes could be in Rettendon. Of course he could. But he could also be in any other place within a 10 to 15 square mile radius of that beacon. It doesn't prove anything. So where does that actually leave us? It leaves us with a great deal of scope in terms of the actual truth regarding the Essex Boys case. We base and we look at this story from the very beginning through the eyes of Darren Nichols on far too many occasions. That isn't anyone's fault. It's just a story that's been told so often that it's almost become ingrained into our minds. The fact is we don't know. We don't know where these individuals were at certain times. It's all assumption. It's all based on the word of Darren Nichols. If you believe Darren Nichols, then that's fine. That's what you believe. But there's no actual factual proof. There's no factual proof, never has been factual proof that certain people were in certain places at certain times as it's been portrayed in many documentaries, films and books. That just simply is not the case. So let me know in the comment section below your own thoughts and theories regarding the Essex Boys case. Do you believe Darren Nichols is telling the whole truth, part truth, or simply a pack of lies? Do you believe, as discussed earlier on in this video, that there was enough motive for Michael Steele to bloody his hands in terms of killing Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? Or was there, or could there be, a mystery party involved somewhere down the chain? Was it the fact that Michael Steele was simply paid to get these individuals to the bottom of Workhouse Lane on the evening of December the 6th?